Hey everybody, welcome back to our journey through the Bible. Our readings from John right now, they have us in some of those early healing stories of Jesus. After the story of the healing of an official's son at the tail end of chapter 4, chapter 5 opens with the healing of that man at the side of the Bethzatha pool. Now, I don't want to get into the depths of the healing itself, as that's part of the story that really grabbed me as I read it this week. And so I want to bring that into our worship life a few weeks from now. But suffice it today to say for today that Jesus heals this particular man who's been ill for nearly 4 decades, and then that man stands up and walks away. Today, that's really all I'm concerned about, because I'm less concerned with what happened or where or how, and I'm more focused on when. These are the words that follow John's account of that healing. This starts with the second half of the 9th verse of chapter 5, and I'll continue on through verse 18. Now that day when this healing occurred was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been cured, "It is the Sabbath. It's not lawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered them, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is this man who said to you, 'Take up your mat, take it up and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had disappeared in the crowd that was there. And later, Jesus found that man in the temple. And he said to him, "See, you have been made well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Therefore, the Jews started persecuting Jesus because he was doing such things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, My Father is still working, and I also am working. For this reason, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, therefore making himself equal to God. Now, this particular discourse, of course, is one of many dialogues that surround the Sabbath in the Gospels. This issue seems to be one of the recurring and most divisive issues that arises in the ministry of Jesus, whether it's because he was healing or helping or his disciples were picking grain. There is this intermittent and yet persistent debate that goes on between Jesus and the teachers of the law about the Sabbath. The core issue, of course, is that of people working on the Sabbath. The traditional view of the Sabbath, which was certainly held in something of a hard-line manner by the leaders of the Jewish establishment of Jesus' day, it was simple. You don't work. The key in that was that almost everything was considered work. There were restrictions on how you could cook, how you could take care of animals. You wouldn't dare tend to the fields on the Sabbath. And even as technology advanced over the years beyond that, the notion of operating machinery in any manner became part of the question. Some of you have heard me talk about before in Orthodox areas of Israel where they would have elevators stop on every floor of a multi-story building so that no one would have to, on the Sabbath, go and press a button and operate the elevator. That was the mindset between those who challenged Jesus again and again on these Sabbath regulations. In their minds, Jesus and his disciples are callously flouting God's law. In almost every one of these moments of Sabbath conflict, that's the argument from their side of the equation. What I think is interesting to consider, however, is that Jesus' argument about the Sabbath is not always the same from one to the next. If you read through the various Sabbath discussions that emerge in the Gospels, one of the things you will discover is that while his detractors always come from that legalistic mindset, his responses seem to shift from one controversy to the next. Now, to be clear, I don't mean to say that he's changing his argument, but more that his arguments are many. In one, he speaks of the Son of Man himself as the Lord of the Sabbath. In another, he says that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And still another, he compares his acts to that of a farmer saving an animal. And when his disciples eat on the Sabbath, he likens it to the priests in the temple. My point here is that our attention is so often drawn into the heart of the Sabbath controversy in these passages. But I think the greatest food for our contemporary lives of discipleship needs to come not from that same old condemnation and critique, but from the wisdom that Jesus provides in his varied responses. And here, that response is pretty simple. My Father is still working, and so am I. In other words, Jesus replies by saying, God never ceases to work for the care of his children, so why would I? Remember the context. Jesus just healed this man on the Sabbath. Jesus walked up to that man on the side of the Bethzatha pool, restored his health, and sent him walking away. That's the work that Jesus did. He cared for one of God's children. He loved one of God's children. He brought healing and new beginnings into the life of one of God's children. There are a lot of responses that Jesus provides throughout these Sabbath controversies in the Bible, and many of them, I think, speak volumes to our role in this world that surrounds us. And I'll be honest, this whole notion of the varied responses of Jesus to that sustained Sabbath critique by his detractors, it's something that I think is going to become a sermon series later this year. I've never really thought about it in the way that I've laid it out for you today until I was preparing these words for this message. And Julie and I are already talking about how that might flow into our worship life later this spring. But for today, however, I want to focus specifically on this particular response of Jesus. My Father is still working, and so am I. Now, sure, there's plenty we can take from this and other passages about our role in things. Fundamental in this particular response from Jesus, however, is that simple and irrefutable promise that God doesn't stop. That Jesus doesn't stop. Not for the restrictions of our legalistic minds, not for the restraints and limitations of this world, not for our expectations, not for anything we can conjure or consider. God does not stop working for the care of his children. Jesus does not stop working to bear the love of God into the lives of his people. There's a lot we can draw from these Sabbath passages about our role in things, and I expect we're going to come a lot more into that in our worship life later this spring. For today, however, I simply want to leave you with the glorious promise of this particular response that Jesus provides. No matter when, no matter where, no matter what, no matter why, God is at work. And so is the risen Christ who sits at his side. Let's be in prayer together. Loving and gracious God, what an incomparable joy it is to know that you are at work in and around us. Help us, God, to rely on the promise that you never cease to work your love into our lives. Open our eyes to the wonders of your love born into our lives through the work of your Son, the work of your Spirit. Give us, God, the bliss that comes from truly trusting in these words of Jesus, that no matter when and no matter where, you are at work, and so is he. For we pray it in his name. Amen. As always, I thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful couple days, and Pray you'll join us Sunday morning for worship in person or on Facebook. And then, of course, next Tuesday here at noon for our next devotional through the journey in the Bible. Thanks for joining me.